Ad-Darimi say, whenever I leave the house, and on whatever thing my eyes fall on, Sabr. Allah Ta'ala says, Wallahu yuhibbu as-sabirin. Allah Ta'ala is lief with Adikina.
School governing body of South Coast Madrasa.
A biography of Uthman Abdul Rahim Muhammad, prisoner 786 of Guantanamo. Uthman Abdul Rahim Muhammad is a 26-year-old Yemeni who, before being taken into custody by Pakistani security forces at the Afghan border in late 2001, studied law and taught the Quran in Afghanistan.
While being detained by American forces in Kandahar, Muhammad witnessed a Quran being thrown in a battle of human waste. At Guantanamo, he has experienced a host of other affronts to his religion, such as the call to prayer, the adhan, being stopped entirely.
He has participated in camp-wide hunger strikes, including the Geneva Conventions and World Medical Association protocols for addressing prisoners who decline nourishment.
The first poem of my life. Move it cautiously through the land of those who speak no Arabic, even if they gave you oaths bound by oaths. Their only aim is to worship petty cash, and for it they will break all vows. I came to their land to pursue an education, and saw such malice amongst them. They surrounded the mosque with their weapons drawn, as if in a battlefield. They said to us, "Come out peacefully and don't utter a single word."
Into a transport truck they lifted us, and in shackles of injustice they bound us. For 16 hours we walked. For the entire time we remained in shackles. The soldier struck with his boot. He said, "We are all equally subjects." All of us wanted to evacuate our bowels, but they insisted on denying us. In the prison's darkness they spread us out. In the cold's bitterness we sat.
When the red-faced infidels came to spend their money, never had I seen such tribulation. In a warplane they brought us up, and after a half hour, brought us down. We saw such insults among them. Not even the book of God was protected. Along with their malice, they were foolish. Tribulations, then hitting and imbecility, for they are a people without reasonable minds, due to their supply of alcoholic drinks.
The priest came to us in our time of need, on the condition that we raise the card with a cross. If you want dignity and protection, then raise the cross for protection. All of us threw the card away, intent that our spirits be redeemed in sacrifice. They carried us afterwards to Cuba because it is an afflicted isle.
Out of spite, they showed us such impudence. Their war is against Islam and injustice.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Thank you very much for your kind introduction. I'm very glad to be here today, not only here but also in South Africa, or Africa itself. It's my first time. My foreparents originally came from this continent, but they were taken away by slaveholders and taken to the Caribbean, the West Indies, where my parents and a few generations back come from. Now, what's interesting about that, of course, is that this journey from Africa, from the old world to the new world, is a journey which is still taking place, unfortunately, today by many people. Guantanamo Bay is an example of that. We see people who were taken, ripped from their families, from their homes, and taken across continents onto a Caribbean island, not too far from where my family still reside. But rather than have a sandy beach, palm trees, a holiday, they're incarcerated in a prison camp. And they're still there, without charge, without trial, and without any rights. To bring things back to Africa, back in the days of slavery, Britain, the Dutch, the French would kidnap and rip these people from their tribes, from their homes. But now we have a system whereby African nations are actually partaking, are actually collaborating, are actually complicit in the destruction of their own people. Many of you may have heard of black sites, places where prisoners are held without access to due process. They're held without access to trial or basic rights. Some of them are in Somalia, some of them are in Djibouti, Nigeria, across the continent. And it's our role here in launching in South Africa to shed some more light on these black sites. They're called black sites because there is no light shed on them at the moment. So we want to bring these to light, and hopefully we'll be able to do so with your help and with your assistance as well. I just want to talk about one of the cases that at Cage we routinely sort of deal with. So Cage is an organisation, we're based in London, and from time to time prisoners will call us and say, I'm being held in X and Y, can you try and help me? So one of these people who called us about 6 months ago was a gentleman who was being kept in the notorious Tora prison of Egypt. Tora prison, for those of you who don't know, is where the current leadership of the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt are currently being held. Some of them are being tortured, some of them are being abused. So he had called us and said that he's been held in this prison. We then did some research and we found out the narrative of his story. This was someone who came to the UK as a student from the Netherlands, from Holland. And while a student in the UK, the British Security Services, we call them the MI5, they started to pressure him and ask him to work for them. This guy refused. They applied more and more pressure until he left the country to go to Germany for a short period. While he was out of the country, the British government sent him a letter to his house in the UK, and they said to him that he's not allowed to return to the UK. This was someone who had his mother, his brother, his children in the UK. So he was not allowed to return. Simply why? Because he wouldn't work with the security services. But the excuse they gave was that he was involved in Islamic extremism. If he was involved in Islamic extremism, then surely they should have arrested him. But no, this was just an excuse. The story carried on that when this young man went to Egypt in order to learn Arabic and to further his Islamic knowledge, he was then incarcerated when General Sisi launched a coup and swept into power. While he was incarcerated in this prison, the British security services came to him face to face inside the prison and tried again to recruit him. And they said, look, if you work for us, we will get you released straight away. If you work for us, we'll get you released. He's been someone who's been incarcerated for absolutely no reason except for the fact he wouldn't work with them. Eventually, there appeared to have been a change of heart among the Egyptians, and they released him. We were very surprised, so they released him. But to get from Egypt into Europe, he would have to travel to Turkey, travel through Turkey. So we got on the first plane in Egypt, and he traveled towards the Netherlands, but stopped off in Turkey. As soon as he got into Turkey, he was arrested again. Brothers and sisters, this is the third continent that we're speaking about here. Europe, Africa, and now, if we want to call it Turkey, Asia. Okay, so this is a manhunt that's taken place across 3 continents. And it transpired that when the British couldn't get him, the Americans now came in to try and incarcerate him. So they told the Turkish that they have an extradition request for this man to be taken from Turkey to the United States. And they claimed that he was involved in some sort of extremism. Luckily, our brothers and sisters in Turkey were alert to their plans, alert to their plots. And, there's a verse in the Quran that they plot and Allah is plotting. Allah is the best of plotters, And the Turkish refused to grant the Americans their extradition request. I just thought I'll share that with you, just so you could understand the lengths that the powers that be will go to often take in innocent men. We know in Guantanamo, 750 prisoners, 600 released, none of them charged. These are ordinary people. It could have been any of us in here, brothers, sons, fathers, any of us. This method of talking to detainees and their families allowed Cage to uncover the existence of at least 150 renditions and black sites across the world. Rendition is basically the method of taking one person from one country and taking them to another. And Cage was able to reveal this in one of its reports. Interestingly enough, there was actually in that same report an account of a rendition that took place in this country, South Africa, as well. I'm not too sure, but we can maybe talk about that afterwards. It was also the first organization to reveal the complicity of British in the torture of its own citizens. You may know that one of those citizens, Muazzam Beg, he was taken from Pakistan, taken to Bagram, taken to Guantanamo eventually. And at every step of the way, he was met by British officials who would interview him, but would refuse to help him. I appeal to you today to please take this cause that Cage is supporting very, very seriously. I haven't been aware of any other organization in the world that are taking the risks, that are going out and doing the work, the hard work, the grafting work of trying to bring these cases to light. And, it's not an easy thing. Muazzam Beg is paying the price in some ways for only exposing the truth. So this is work which it needs to be done. We need people to support us as well. And support us in any way possible, with yourselves, with your hands, with your pockets, in whatever way you can. I'd like just to also say thank you very much to all the organizers of this event, and to Cage Africa team. It's the first time I've met them. And inshallah, I hope that this is the beginning of even a bigger Cage in Africa than we have in the UK. Inshallah ta'ala. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه.
I now have great pleasure in bringing one of our key guests. But I want to introduce Sheikh Abdul Salam Zaif. Sheikh Abdul Salam Zaif was the ambassador to Pakistan when the war on terror was unleashed. Essentially, he was arrested by the Pakistanis and he was sold. He was sold to the Americans. He was then incarcerated in Guantanamo Bay for 4 years. He was interrogated over 340 times at lengths of anything between 4 to 6 hours. In the first month, he was shackled and deprived of sleep for the entire month. Amidst all this, he managed to memorize the Quran while he was at Guantanamo. Sheikh Abdul Salam Zaif.
Guantanamo, maybe you know, this is the land of Cuba, and was contract with American more than 100 years to be with American just for $400 in a year. Now it is occupied by American, and the people of Cuba, they are exiled from the Cuba of Guantanamo. They are exiled from there, and just the military base, and I think 45,000 soldiers of American, they are there. They built the Guantanamo Bay there because they are thinking this is out of the law. And the international law is not implemented because this is not related with any country. It's not related with Cuba. The national law is not implemented because this is not the land of USA. And they put illegal prison there. And they put a lot of people there. And this was for 3 reasons, I think. First reason, to take information from the people by any way, by torture, by force, and by giving hope, false hope. And they wanted anything in the mind, from beginning of life till you were in Guantanamo Bay. And the second purpose of Guantanamo Bay was they were telling to the world in that time, we keep very dangerous people. Especially they were telling to the Islamic world, if you are not cooperating with us, not helping us, we will release them and they will swallow you. And I think some countries, they helped them. And the third reason, it was to scare the people, which they are not obeying to them or they are against them. That was a message to them. They will be in a prison. There is no law, no principle, no human right. The life there was in the hand of American soldier. In 4 years, I didn't see anyone except American soldier. And the principle was not there. Even the soldiers, they were telling us that we are feeding you, this is our mercy on you. Because this is not really right. You are terrorists and you have no right to be fed or to be clothed. And the interrogator, when we were there, and they were telling us that if you are cooperating with us, you are okay, will be released. And to tell us the truth and to do what the Americans want. If you are not cooperating with us, you are danger. You will be here, and maybe you will be killed. I remember the day when I was coming to Guantanamo Bay. The interrogator, they told me, you know that this is our prison in Kandahar. You will go to Guantanamo Bay, but you have 2 choices if you're choosing anyone. One choice to be released, the other choice to go to Guantanamo and be there forever. Which one you are choosing? I told them, I'm choosing to be released and to go to my family and my home. They says there is condition for that. If you want to release, and we will give you $5 million, and we will give you anything that you need, and but do cooperate with us. Mean spy us and do something against your people, and you will be our friend, you will be respected, and that's you will be released. And the other choice, if you're rejecting that, you'll go to Guantanamo Bay. I told them, they said, think about that. I told them, I'm not thinking about that. And I chose Guantanamo to go there. But I will not do anything against the people, against Afghanistan, against the brother and sister. They said this was a very bad choice you chose. And you will go to Guantanamo. And this was my guilty, why I was not cooperating with them. I didn't do anything against them. And I saw a lot of people in Guantanamo Bay, Afghanis, former, some people which was important people really, and the famous people, and Islamic scholar, and knowledgeable people, they brought to Guantanamo by the name of Al-Qaeda and Taliban, tortured and forced to give information about Taliban, about Al-Qaeda, and other. Most people, they were not aware of Taliban, exactly not aware about Al-Qaeda, and they were telling them, we didn't know, but they wanted information from them. And eventually they were released for no charge, no crime, and no compensation for their life. 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, until 12 years. And still we have 14 Afghans there. The principle of the Guantanamo Bay, you know that they wanted information, and also they wanted some people to be honest. Honest means to give them all what they had in the head. That's the principle for them was just the choosing of the soldier. The no human right, no principle, and no law, no nothing for them. And the life of the people was in the hand of them. And if they were putting in the isolation, if they were putting in alone, if they were putting with the people, this was with them. The kind of torture they gave to the people. And so this was two kind of torture, physically and psychologically. Physically, you know that some people I saw, this was, they took them in the ship. This was a very fast ship in the ocean, and they were putting them in the ocean, and 3-4 days they were walking. They were throwing in the ocean, not allowing to sleep, and eventually they were doing something by the ship to scare them. And you know that 3-4 days when you didn't sleep, it's a lot of things you cannot able to be control yourself. You will be scared, you will be crying, you will do something, and they wanted. And also some people, they were putting in the room, they were increasing the air condition to them, and like a frozen something, and they were there. Sometimes they were bringing the dogs to the people, and they were showing and throwing the people somewhere. And also they were beating some people. They had some people strong. Sport mean when someone was not talking, for example, and they were these people were fighting with them. They were beating. They were doing something with them, like to beat them. We know some people was paralyzed, and some other people was sick, and some other people was tortured like that. The Rasul Akram sallallahu alayhi wa says, "Wallahu fi awni akhihi ma dama al-abdu fi wallahu fi awni abdihi ma dama al-abdu fi awni akhihi." He says Allah is supporting and helping his slave in Banda till he is an helper and a cooperator with other people. And this is, I think this is, we want Allah will be cooperated with us. We want Allah help us. If we want asking for help of Allah, you have to help other, because this is the way to rescue us, and this is the obligation of all Muslim, especially, and also obligation of all humankind, especially the people that are struggling for justice. جزاكم الله خير الجزاء والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما. صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما. صلوا عليه.
I'm now going to introduce our next keynote speaker. And it is extremely interesting that Sister Yvonne and Sheikh Zaif have a common thread or some form of link, and I'm sure she's going to tell you about it. But just to share with you the ages of people at Guantanamo Bay, just for your own curiosity, the youngest is 12, the youngest is 12, and the oldest is 105. Sheikh will tell you the brother that's 105 cannot even dissect an apple. But he was arrested by the Americans on the pretext of being a terrorist. So you have an indication of how wide and how disingenuous the so-called war on terror has been. Anybody and everybody, irrespective of age, creed, health, you were wanted, you were taken away. These people were sold at around 25,000 US dollars for every capture. So it gives you an indication of how just the so-called war on terror was. I'm now going to call on Sister Yvonne Ridley. For those of you not familiar with Sister Yvonne, and I'm sure there's very few of you or none of you would not have heard of Yvonne. Yvonne is a British journalist, a war correspondent, and an activist on board of Cage UK. She writes on several issues relating to Islam and politics today and travels the world campaigning and fundraising for causes from Gaza and justice for Afia Siddiqui. Sister Yvonne Ridley, thank you.
Brothers, sisters, Salam alaikum. Yesterday, we launched Cage Africa from the Apartheid Museum, a fantastic location to launch Cage Africa. And before we did the business of launching Cage Africa, I got a chance to walk through the museum, and it was quite an emotional journey for me because I remembered some of the highlights and lowlights in South Africa's amazing history of resistance. And this emotional journey reminded me just how far South Africa has come from the brutal days of apartheid. And as I looked at some of the posters and documents on the wall, I also realized that while South Africa has moved forwards into the 21st century, back in the UK, we seem to have regressed. I often wondered where the British government got some of its anti-terror legislation from. And now I know. David Cameron must have been through the Apartheid Museum. Seriously, I was reading the South African Bill of Rights, and there's a section there that says no citizen may be deprived of his citizenship. But it's happening in Britain today. People are having their passports taken away. They're having their citizenship, their British citizenship, removed. While David Cameron came to South Africa for Nelson Mandela's memorial service and eulogized about what a great man he was plotting to do the very things that the apartheid government had brought in all those years ago. And one of them was the threat of removing citizenship. And when I saw this in the South African Bill of Rights, I thought how shameful of David Cameron and his government, to remove the citizenship of people. What a disgraceful backward step Britain is taking. Then I saw another document going back to 1963. And it was when the apartheid government of South Africa passed a law permitting 90 days detention without charge, without trial. In 1965, it was extended to 180 days, and sometimes it would be extended to 360 days. And I saw this, and I thought, this is the direction that the British government is going in. We're nearly there already. We've come together, and really, when you think about it, it's a shame. It's a crying shame that Cage Africa is being launched, because it means that the injustices in the war on terror have not only exploded onto the scene since 9/11, but have now spread rapidly around the world. And this continent, Africa, is going to play a major role. So it was vital when it was decided, a group of human rights lawyers known to many of you came together and suggested to Cage UK, you need a chapter, and you need a chapter in Africa. I can't think of anywhere better than to have it in South Africa, because you've already come from a dark place. You know what it's like when injustice is the law, resistance is the duty of every person. So it is vital that Cage's work from the early days in Guantanamo spreads further. And we need your help tonight. We need your help on so many levels. We need your money, because these operations don't run on fresh air. We need your support. We need you to volunteer. We need your children to volunteer. MashaAllah, the Cage Youth Wing tonight, what an inspiration they were. A reference has already been made to the fact that under one roof is myself, a former Taliban captive, and His Excellency Sheikh Abdul Salim Zaif, the former Taliban ambassador in Islamabad. We were both in Islamabad in 2001, and I don't suppose he noticed me among the hundreds of journalists that turned up for that first press conference after the events of 9/11. But I remember him quite clearly. And if someone had told me 13 years ago, you and that man will come together, united in a fight for justice, and you'll also share the same faith, I would have thought, never in a million years. And here I am today with the same message of the need for justice as Sheikh Zaif has given you today. the Sheikh, my brother in Islam. And you know, I was told when I emerged from my prison in Afghanistan, and people asked me how I had been treated. And bearing in mind I had been the prisoner from hell, there was absolutely no love lost between me and the Taliban. In fact, when I was handed over to the Pakistanis, I don't know who was happier, them to see the back of me or me just to get out of Afghanistan. But when people said, "How were you treated?" I told the truth, and I said, actually, I was treated with great courtesy and respect. And I always remember somebody telling me some days later that the people who held me weren't interested in money. My newspaper was prepared to pay £2 million for my release. And the Taliban said, "We're not interested. We just want to know, is she a journalist or isn't she? We want to know more about her." And when I was released, I was told, these people aren't interested in money because their real currency is honour. Thank you very much for listening. Please dig deep. Please make your pledges. And please, let's get lift off for Cage Africa. Thank you very much. Salam alaikum.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما صلوا عليه.
Thank you very much, Yvonne, for an extremely inspirational talk. I'm going to call upon Advocate Aslam Mutala SC from Durban to share a few comments with us, please.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina Nabiyyina Muhammadun sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri. Wahlul uqdatan min lisani yafkahu qawli. My respected brothers and sisters in Islam, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is indeed a singular honor and privilege for me to have been extended the opportunity to convey a brief message to you on this momentous and august occasion. And I would at the outset like to pay tribute to each and every one of you for having taken the time and the energy and effort, and to have made sacrifice from your valuable family schedules to be here this evening. And I'm quite sure that your support of this function will be vindicated by the success of Cage Africa going forward. And it's the moral support and the moral strength that comes from your participation that is necessary to encourage those individuals who've found it within themselves to take the responsibility, and the very brave step in responsibility, to form Cage Africa, an organization that is necessary to fight injustice and to fight the violation of human rights throughout the world. And the message I would like to convey to you goes back to a point in our history as far back as 1920. And many of you might be familiar with this great soldier of Islam known as Sheikh al-Hind, Maulana Mahmud al-Hassan, who fought tirelessly against British colonial rule in India. And in the few days prior to his passing in the year 1920, at the age of approximately 69, Maulana Mahmud al-Hassan was addressing a group of ulama and scholars in Pakistan who were very curious to hear about his experiences, his life of struggle and his life of sacrifice, and his quest for education. And when we look at the Holy Quran, we ask ourselves, what is it about Islamic unity? What is the Quranic teaching about brotherhood? And many of you would know the Quranic verse that says, إِنَّمَا الْمُؤْمِنِينَ إِخْوَةٌ, that verily the community of Muslims are in fact brothers. And that brotherhood is what we need to embrace. And brotherhood in Islam is not dependent on race, color, or religion, or creed. The Islamic concept of brotherhood is a unique one. And it requires what? It requires solidarity in rejecting the forces of falsehood, in rejecting the forces of batil, and embracing truth as taught to us by the one Allah, as revealed to us in the Holy Quran. And if we embrace truth and reject batil, then the ingredients of brotherhood are fomented. The ingredients of brotherhood are met. And we need to unite ourselves as Muslims behind the banner of Tawheed, behind the banner of the oneness of Allah, and behind the banner of the message of Allah, that Muslims are one people, we are one community, we are brothers. And the achievement of the mercy, the bounty, and the assistance of the Almighty Allah depends on us achieving that particular objective. The Quran says to us, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. Allah has not created you excepting for His worship. Now what does worship mean? My respected brothers and sisters, it's not confined to formal worship. It's not confined to ritualistic worship. Worship of Allah demands that in every action in our lives, in every sphere of our life, we fulfill the command of the Almighty Allah. There is no moment in our life where a Muslim should not be asking himself, what does the Almighty Allah expect of me in this situation? And this obligation to worship extends to what? It extends to the very theme we are talking about here this evening. The fight against injustice. The fight for the establishment of the law of the Almighty Allah. The fight for equality. The fight for dignity. The fight for honor. These are all noble values that the religion of Islam teaches, and that we as Muslims need to embrace. And if there is any injustice in our midst, we as Muslims, as an act of ibadah, as an act of worship, are obliged to combat it, and are obliged to stamp it out. And in that context, there's just one little message I'd like to share in the context of prisoners. And in fact, we say that Allah says in the Quran, in Surah Al-Insan, verses 8 to 9, Allah says, and He talks about the believers, talks about the people of Iman. And Allah says, and the believers are whom? They are the ones who feed from what they love for themselves. And whom do they feed? They feed the indigent, they feed the orphan, and they feed the prisoners of war. And they say, we feed you for the sake of Allah. No reward do we desire from you, nor thanks. And Allah has made taking care of prisoners and enemy prisoners an obligation of our deen, an obligation of the responsibility of His worship. And the closeness to Allah depends on fulfilling these obligations of worship. Allah then shows to us in this verse when He says that they provide for them and feed them, referring to the prisoners, the indigent and the orphans, from what they love for themselves. And what He conveys to us by those words is that it is not sufficient just to give them our surplus food, but to prefer them over ourselves and to give them the best. Even if we have a need for it ourselves. Conversely, if a Muslim denies nourishment to a prisoner of war, it is in fact a major sin in Islam. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam alluded to this when he said, a woman was punished on account of a cat. She kept that cat in confinement until it died. And on account of that, she in fact entered the hellfire. She confined it without feeding it or giving it anything to drink. She did not let it out to eat on its own. Since a prisoner is unable to provide for himself, it is incumbent on his captor to provide for him. If the punishment for abusing a cat is so great, then imagine what the punishment must be when where a human being is concerned. Allah has vested the human being with a special honor. He says, we have honored the children of Adam. It is enough for us that Allah has placed the needs of enemy prisoners of war on the same level as the needs of the poor and the orphans, when He says, the indigent, the orphan, and the prisoner of war, encouraging us to spend on them and to treat them kindly. And such good conduct can be the cause of their being guided. And I'll conclude by referring you to the case of a Sahabi by the name of Tamama bin Atal al-Hanafi. He was an idolater, and he was captured by the Muslim army in battle. And he was then brought to the holy mosque in Medina, the Masjid al-Nabawi, where he was restrained. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam approached him respectfully and said, "What have you, O Tamama?" And he replied, "Actually, I have a lot going for me. If you kill me, you will kill a man whose blood will surely be avenged. If you are generous, then you are generous to a man who knows how to be grateful. If you are after money, then ask of me whatever amount you like." Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam left him at this point. On the second day when he approached him, Tamama said basically the same thing. On the third day, the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Let Tamama go." They unbound him and they let him go. He went on his way quickly. He cleansed himself and then returned, declaring, "I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and I bear witness, Ya Muhammad, that you are His messenger. I swear to Allah that there was no man on the face of the earth who I hated more than you. Now you have become to me the dearest of men. And I swear by Allah that, but now, Islam is the most beloved to me of all religions, when at one point it was to me the most loathsome religion on earth." This is the effect that kindness and good conduct has. Look at the effect it had on this man, who was far from being a simpleton. He was a man of distinction, the leader of his people, and his acceptance of Islam was not an act of deception, nor did it take place under any compulsion or duress. His rights of freedom of his worship were respected. But the conduct and the example of the Rasul of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that conduct inspired him to embrace Islam. We as Muslims, we need to give expression to the noble values of deen in our lives. We need to be exemplars for the whole of mankind. And as the Quran tells us, and verily, in the life of the Rasul of Allah is a perfect model of behavior, is a perfect example for those of you who seek to meet Allah and those of you who look forward to the final day. So my respected brothers, let us leave this gathering this evening reuniting, realigning ourselves with the fundamentals of our deen. Let's understand why we've been placed on the earth. Let's renew our relationship with our Creator, and let's live our lives henceforth in compliance with the command of Allah, that I have created you for nothing excepting my worship, and live every moment of our lives in accordance with His obedience. With those words, I thank you.
صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما حتى تنالوا جنة ونعيما. 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 صلوا عليه